On screen, we've got the post from William Lee just a few hours ago. He announced the 100,000th refresh of the ES8 being delivered, and he references that it took 215 days. But the point I want to make is it was 20 days here in this month of April, going from the 90th to the 100,000th. So that means we've definitely got NIO coming in with 10,000 plus on the delivery side for the ES8 alone. And with about a week left on this, and the fact that I've tracked this data for several years, when we were able to access the weekly data, and what I learned from that was that NIO would typically deliver more toward the latter part of the month, or in the last half of the month. They usually had a faster cadence on the deliveries. Means I think NIO's probably coming in with 15,000 or more of the ES8 just in this month of April. What do you think? Any predictions on that? And then let's talk a little bigger picture here, because this is the first quarter breakdown of BEVs, and NIO absolutely dominant here with the first place. Look at how far ahead they are in the first place price point from the 400 to 500,000 RMB. This is of course where the ES8 is being sold, but not just that, you've also got them in the top 5 for the 500,000 RMB price range and above. And then if we go over here, Onvo is ranking in the top 10, and NIO in the top 10, in the top 3, frankly, for the 3 to 400,000 RMB price range. This again solidifying NIO as becoming recognized slowly but surely within that enormous Chinese market as the premium BEV maker. Also, I don't want to ignore this. And in fact, I hope that Thinkercar, somebody shout out to Thinkercar, because I believe I ran the numbers on Firefly, and I think they were close to 12,000 for the first quarter. And I'm not seeing them up here. I think they should actually be on, I'm not sure where the price point puts them, but they should be somewhere on this list. So somebody shout out to Thinkercar. I'll also thank them when I post this video for sharing the content, but you also have Onvo placing the top 5 in the 2 to 300,000 RMB price range. So this just, within the BEV sub-segmented piece of the market. If we look broader market, this is what things look like. NIO still dominant, and this is exactly the kind of thing that, to me, when we see NIO here, beating Audi, Benz, BMW, these are the companies that they want to take that market share from, and yet those companies are still selling a lot of gas, vehicles. So there is still a huge piece of the market that NIO can take. But I love the fact that they were still able to kind of win overall first place, because this is exactly the kind of thing that, for me, at the bottom of the screen, the first major growth phase for NIO, as I identified it years ago, was market awareness. The market within China and globally has to know about this brand. They also have to recognize this brand as premium. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that compared to Tesla here in just a second, because Tesla just had their earnings. So I'm also going to pull up their chart, talk about a couple of things with respect to NIO and Tesla, not because they're competitors. They absolutely are not. That's my view and my take. But coming back to the data, I just thought this is, I like tracking this big picture data from, the overview of the market in China, to see, as this is all passenger vehicle brands. And, the thing that really stands out to me is when we come back to this data, you see NIO, you see Onvo, and Firefly, I believe, should absolutely be here ranking, but I'm not sure what price point they would be. So again, I hope Thinkercar can update and or correct that and get them up here so we can see them. But I love that the NIO group is doing so well in the BEV sub-segmented part of the market. However, when we come back and look at the big picture, the broader overview, there's still a lot of market going to different brands. And that, of course, includes a lot of gas sales. So there's still a pretty big pivot point, especially in that higher priced price range, or that upper end price range for NIO and Onvo, perhaps, and maybe Firefly as well, to take more market share. So anyway, that's what I wanted to lead off with. And now let's talk. It's 7:33 a.m. Central Time as I'm recording this. It is Thursday, April 23rd, 2026. How's your day going? Or night, whenever you watch this. And by the way, I was absent. I haven't done a video for, gosh, it maybe has even been about a week. I'm not for sure. I've had some other projects that took precedence, and I had to spend a lot more time on them And then also spending more time with family. Recently, I've got a huge family, lots of brothers and sisters, tons of nieces and nephews. And so that's been a blessing to be able to spend some time with them. But I did want to, and several times I thought about, oh gosh, I need to get a video out, some content out, but it just didn't materialize. Hopefully things will slow down a little bit for me and I can focus and get a little more time shared. I'm still doing the research, but actually committing the time to sit down and do a video, it just didn't materialize for these last few days. So anyway, thanks for listening to that little explanation. And now let's talk NIO. This is just year to date on the left side of the screen. We've got, this is your January 2nd. So this would have been the beginning of the year. NIO opened on that day, January 2nd at $5.32. And with only still, even to this point, only 2 days right here and right here, 2 days intraday with 100 million share trade volume, NIO remains very, I would say just subdued sentiment wise. The volume remains very low, and yet this stock continues to slowly move its way up. I remain bullish, and I'm going to continue to hang on, wait for it. Let me do this real quick. Let's switch something out here. At the bottom of the screen, I'm going to switch this out. Of course, we're still tracking profitability and battery as a service. That for me will be when there are a million NIO sales out there. So I think we're probably a year or two out from that yet. But I do want to switch now to this, because this is the short-term stock price as I've been tracking it the last few years. I plan on keeping this at the bottom of the screen in a lot of the videos until we see NIO at $15 or above. That's just my take because of the broader picture and really the sell-off that took place over these last years. And once we kind of look at the trade volume, which I've already covered here for this video, only 2 days of 100 million share trade volume in this year to date. And there are two things that happened when NIO made this meteoric rise or move. You had the FTDs drop off right in here, pretty obvious to see looking back, and you've seen them pick back up and remain very elevated. And then the other thing that happened is that trade volume really went up. We had 75 days within the 6-month move that I tracked where NIO stock moved from $3.50 to above $55. And in those 6 months, 75 trade days with 100 million share trade volume or bigger. That's why the trade volume remains a simple indicator for me in the short term with respect to short-term stock price action. The FTDs, as I stated, they remain elevated. But it's also worth noting, I think, that it took years for this stock price to be brought down to these levels. And we still haven't seen it really rebound and really make big moves up. So do I think that is, in the cards and in the future? Yeah, I do. Is it in the near term? That I have no idea. But I think if we're going to see it, I think we'll see it with this ignition of big volume. And I think we'll see a lot of those days. So I'd be looking for 100 million plus share trade volume days during the day for multiple days. I think that would be a pretty easy thing for us to track. So I'll keep it in mind and in the back of my mind. Also, I think the subdued sentiment comment that I made earlier is frankly just because unless we see big volume or unless folks really start recognizing companies like NIO and the reality that Chinese EVs are coming to the US, we just don't know how soon. I think it's going to be sooner than a lot of people are expecting. And now I've got Tesla pulled up because I want to talk about a couple of things here. I listened to a few guys. They all drive Teslas. A couple of them are analysts. And they were talking yesterday. It was with Tesla, with their earnings. I'm always curious to kind of track what's going on there. And I actually didn't listen in on the call. Typically, the first roughly 10 minutes of those calls, Elon's on there pumping something. So I don't know. I would expect that he pumped something. I don't know what it was because I haven't reviewed it. Later on, maybe today or maybe in the upcoming week or weeks, I'll look back and see what he was pumping. But I'm always curious what the stock price, the action is going to be, sentiment. But in this case, I was very curious because these guys were talking about Tesla, and they were talking about Tesla specifically with regard to here in the US market. And then also with what's going on, EVs being more in demand, especially with rising gas prices. And so, I like to sit back and just listen to other folks and hear what they're thinking and also recognize what they're aware of or unaware of. And the one guy made a comment about BYD only having cheap cars. And BYD, I think, is the only Chinese EV brand that they reference. So two things that tells me. these guys are still clueless. And by these guys, I mean us. We Americans are still clueless about just how good the Chinese EVs are because we haven't seen them. They're not here yet. And even with respect to BYD, suggesting that BYD is cheap, BYD has a very lengthy lineup and they have some very high-end expensive products as well as some very affordable products. But that's not to say that they are cheap compared to Tesla. And so I think this again is a nod to we just got a long way for people to open their eyes, have the awareness and understanding that these Chinese EV companies are legit and they're really good. And so I don't know when we as Americans will get a chance to see them up close and in person. But I was curious. And so I wanted to pull this chart up because you've got Tesla year to date. They opened on January 2nd. The stock price opened at $457.80 right now. And it's pre-market as I'm recording this. It's about 7:40 now a.m. Central Time. But they're trading about 370, just under $375. There was a move up and down yesterday and recently. But, I was just curious what it looked like. Also, some are speculating that the SpaceX IPO or whatever, however that's all going to roll out, that there are investors who are selling Tesla to get into that, or there's some sort of interlay. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm curious because I do know there are some folks who have Tesla who check in on the channel and who are also NIO investors. So I'm curious about anyone, especially if you're a Tesla investor, what's your thought on what you're doing or what your plan is with Tesla and or with respect to Chinese EVs, and just how much damage is it going to do to Tesla with Tesla's market share once Chinese EVs come to the US? I am curious to hear from others, especially Tesla longs, Tesla bulls, Tesla folks. I think it'd be fun to get a little more dialogue between the communities, and hopefully it'll be a positive dialogue because there's nothing wrong with that, right? But anyway, let me check time. You know what? It doesn't matter. I'm going to, well, this is a longer video. Anyway, like I said, it doesn't matter. I'm going to create chapters, timestamps, get this thing up and out, maybe not by market open, but as soon as I can. So in any event, thanks for sticking around to the end because I know some of you did. I'll see y'all again very soon.